The marble staircase of Lincoln High School had witnessed many things: rushed students, spilled coffee, dropped books, but never a teacher being deliberately shoved down its 22 steps by her own students. Miss Imani Washington's body twisted midair, her teaching materials scattering like confetti. But what happened next made every witness question everything they thought they knew about their soft-spoken new English teacher. In exactly 47 seconds, 3 varsity athletes would be on their backs, gasping for air, while their supposed victim stood over them without a single scratch. Her hidden black belt in judo finally revealed to a school that had mistaken her kindness for weakness. Before we dive deeper into this shocking confrontation, I want to thank each of you for being here. Your support through likes and comments helps these important stories reach people who need to hear them. And if this story moves you, please consider hitting the thanks button below every donation, no matter how small. Helps us continue sharing these powerful tales of courage and transformation. Your generosity allows us to find and tell more stories that inspire change and give voice to those who've been silenced. Thank you for being part of this community that believes in standing up against injustice. The morning of September 15th started like any other at Lincoln High School in suburban Minneapolis. Students flooded through the main entrance at 7:45 a.m., their conversations echoing off the polished floors. Among them walked Miss Imani Washington, 28 years old, carrying a worn leather satchel filled with annotated copies of To Kill a Mockingbird and fresh lesson plans she'd stayed up until 2 a.m. perfecting. She'd been teaching at Lincoln for exactly 3 weeks. 3 weeks of subtle hostility, whispered comments, and a particular group of senior boys who seemed determined to make her life miserable. Imani had moved to Minneapolis from Atlanta, leaving behind a comfortable position at a progressive private school to care for her aging mother who'd recently suffered a stroke. The pay cut was substantial, from $65,000 a year to $38,000, but family came first. What she hadn't expected was the culture shock of teaching in a predominantly white suburban school where she was one of only 4 black faculty members among a staff of 92. The ringleader of her tormentors was Tyler Brennan, 18 years old, 6'3", and built like the Division I football prospect he believed himself to be. His father owned 3 car dealerships in the Twin Cities area and sat on the school board, a fact Tyler never let anyone forget. Flanking him were his loyal lieutenants, Connor McBride, whose mother was the district superintendent, and Mason Hughes, whose family had donated the new athletic complex. These 3 had ruled Lincoln High's social hierarchy since freshman year, their privilege as impenetrable as armor. Tyler's campaign against Miss Washington had started subtly. During her first week, he'd accidentally knocked her coffee off her desk, soaking a stack of graded essays. "Oops," he'd said with a smirk that didn't reach his cold blue eyes. "Guess those need to be regraded now." "Huh?" The class had tittered nervously, unsure whether to laugh or intervene. Most chose silence, the safe option, when Tyler Brennan was involved. By week 2, the harassment had escalated. Tyler would arrive late to class deliberately, slamming the door and making a show of taking his seat in the back row. He'd talk over her lessons, making comments just quiet enough that she couldn't definitively call him out, but loud enough to disrupt the entire class. When she'd asked him to stay after class to discuss his behavior, he'd laughed in her face. "What are you going to do?" he'd asked, towering over her 5'6" frame. "Give me detention? My dad will have you gone faster than you can say tenure." He'd leaned in closer, his breath smelling of the energy drink he constantly sipped. "You don't belong here, Miss Washington. This isn't some inner-city school where you can play savior. We don't need your kind here." The words had stung, but Imani had maintained her composure. She'd faced racism before, subtle and overt, throughout her life. From elementary school in Houston, where she was one of 3 black students, to her undergraduate years at a predominantly white institution, where professors constantly confused her with the only other black woman in her program. She learned early that showing anger only fed the narrative they wanted to create. What her tormentors didn't know was that Imani Washington was far more than a soft-spoken English teacher with a gentle smile. Beneath her modest cardigans and sensible flats was a woman who'd spent 15 years studying judo under Master Kenji Takahashi, one of only 12 ninth-degree black belts in the United States. She'd started training at 13 after being bullied in middle school, her mother scraping together $40 a month for lessons at a small dojo in Houston's 3rd Ward. Master Takahashi had seen something special in young Imanino. just physical prowess, but the discipline and mental fortitude that separated good practitioners from great ones. Under his tutelage, she'd competed nationally, winning the USA Judo Junior Olympics at 17 and placing third in the Senior Nationals at 21. Her specialty was knee waza-ground techniques, but her standing throws were equally devastating. She could execute a perfect harai goshi that would send opponents flying before they even realized they'd left their feet. But judo had taught her more than just how to fight. Master Takahashi's first lesson had been about restraint. The strongest warriors, he'd said in his heavily accented English, are those who win without fighting, but when you must fight, end it quickly and decisively. She'd carried those words through college, through her teaching career, through every moment when someone underestimated her because of her race, her gender, or her kiat demeanor. The Thursday before the staircase incident, things had reached a boiling point. Imani had assigned a discussion on racial themes in To Kill a Mockingbird, asking students to draw parallels to modern-day discrimination. Tyler had raised his hand, a rarity that should have warned her. "I think the real discrimination today," he'd said, his voice dripping with false sincerity, "is against people like me. We can't even speak our minds without being called racist. Meanwhile, some people get jobs just because of their skin color. Isn't that right, Miss Washington? I mean, why else would Lincoln hire someone from—" He'd paused dramatically. "Your background?" The classroom had gone silent. 22 pairs of eyes swiveled between Tyler and their teacher, waiting to see how she'd respond. Imani had felt the familiar heat of anger rising in her chest, but she'd breathed deeply, centering herself the way Master Takahashi had taught her. "That's an interesting perspective, Tyler," she'd said calmly. "Would you like to elaborate on what you mean by my background? Are you referring to my master's degree from Northwestern, my 5 years of teaching experience, or perhaps my published work on contemporary American literature?" Tyler's face had flushed red. Connor and Mason had snickered from their seats, not at their friend, but at the situation. They enjoyed any drama that disrupted the monotony of school. But Tyler hadn't backed down. Instead, he'd doubled down. "You know what I mean," he'd said, standing up from his desk. "This diversity hire bullshit. My dad says the school board was pressured to hire more diverse candidates. Quality doesn't matter anymore. Just checking boxes." Several students had gasped. Sarah Chen, the class valedictorian, had started to speak up, but Imani had raised a hand to stop her. This was her battle to fight. "Sit down, Tyler," she'd said, her voice still calm but with an edge of steel that made several students sit up straighter. "Your father is entitled to his opinions, but in my classroom, we will discuss literature and its themes with respect and academic rigor. If you're unable to do that, you're welcome to transfer to another English section." Tula has said, but the look he'd given her was pure venom. After class, she'd overheard him in the hallway with Connor and Mason. "That bitch needs to learn her place," he'd said. "I'm done playing nice." The next morning, Friday, September 15th, Imani had arrived at school with a sense of foreboding. She'd barely slept, her mind replaying the confrontation and wondering if she should report Tyler's behavior to the administration. But she knew how that would go. Tyler's father would make a few calls. She'd be labeled a troublemaker who couldn't handle her students, and her position would become even more precarious. Her mother needed her stable income for medical bills that seemed to multiply daily. She'd climbed the marble staircase to the second floor where her classroom was located, in her mind on the day's lesson plan. The hallway was strangely empty for 7:50 am usually. Students would be rushing to their lockers before first period. She'd noticed Tyler, Connor, and Mason at the top of the stairs but had thought nothing of it. Students often congregated there. It was a natural meeting spot. "Morning, Miss Washington," Tyler had called out, his voice unnaturally cheerful. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" She'd nodded politely, adjusting her heavy bag as she climbed. She was 5 steps from the top when it happened. Connor had accidentally bumped into her from behind, while Tyler simultaneously stepped into her path. The physics was simply nowhere to go but backward. But Mason had been there too, his foot strategically placed to trip her as she tried to regain her balance. Time had slowed as Imani felt herself falling backward. Her bag flew from her shoulder, papers exploding into the air like white birds taking flight. She saw Tyler's satisfied smirk, heard Connor's fake gasp of concern. Registered. Mason already pulling out his phone to record her humiliation. 22 marble steps yawned below her, each edge sharp enough to break bones, crack skulls. End career, sir. Worse. But Imani Washington was not just any teacher. 15 years of muscle memory took over. Her body twisted in midair, executing a perfect Yukamith breakfall technique that was the first thing Master Takahashi had drilled into her. Her right arm swept down, slapping the stairs to dissipate the impact. Her body rolled with the momentum instead of against it. What should have been a catastrophic tumble became a controlled descent that had her landing in a crouch on the landing below, completely unharmed. The silence that followed was deafening. Tyler, Connor, and Mason stared down at her, their mouths hanging open. Other students who'd been hiding around corners because of course this had been planned. Of course there was an audience peeked out with wide eyes. Imani stood slowly, brushing off her skirt. Her eyes, when she raised them to meet Tyler's, held something that made him take an involuntary step back. It wasn't anger, it was worse. It was the calm assessment of a predator deciding whether prey was worth the effort. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent hallway, "I believe you have some explaining to do." Tyler recovered first, his trademark smirk sliding back into place. "Explaining? About what? You tripped? Miss Washington, maybe you should watch where you're going. These stairs can be dangerous for someone who's uncoordinated." Connor laughed nervously. "Yeah. Total accident. Right. Mason? Mason. Still recording." Nodded eagerly. "Got it all on video. Shows you just lost your balance. Happens to everyone." Imani climbed the stairs again, each step deliberate. Students had begun gathering, drawn by the commotion. She saw Sarah Chen, her face pale with worry. She saw other teachers peering out of their classrooms. She saw Principal Davidson at the far end of the hall, clearly assessing whether he needed to intervene. "Delete the video." "Mason," she said quietly when she reached the top. "Or what?" Tyler stepped forward, using his height advantage to loom over her. "You'll give me detention? Call my daddy? Face it. Miss Washington, you're nothing here. Just another diversity hire who can't even walk upstairs without falling. Maybe you should go back to whatever ghetto." He never finished the sentence. Imani's hand shot out, gripping Tyler's wrist as he reached out to push her shoulder. The movement was so fast that most observers couldn't process what they'd seen. Using his own momentum against him, she pivoted on her left foot, her hip sliding under his center of gravity. It was a textbook Harai Goshi sweeping, hip throw executed with the precision of someone who'd performed it 10,000 times. Tyler Brennan, star quarterback and king of Lincoln High, flew through the air with all the grace of a sack of potatoes. He landed flat on his back with a sound that echoed through the hallway like a thunderclap. The air rushed from his lungs in a whoosh that was almost comical. Connor McBride, acting on instinct to defend his friend, charged forward with a wild haymaker. Imani shifted her weight, caught his arm, and used a classic Osoto Garimager outer reap. Connor's feet left the ground, and he joined Tyler on the floor, gasping like a landed fish. Mason Hughes, the smallest of the three, had the good sense to try to run, but adrenaline and peer pressure made him attempt one last act of defiance. He swung his phone at Imani's head. Probably hoping to daze her long enough to escape, she ducked under the swing, grabbed his extended arm, and applied a standing arm lock that brought him to his knees. "The video," she said calmly, applying just enough pressure to make her point without causing injury. "Delete it now." Okay, Mason squeaked, frantically jabbing at his phone screen with his free hand. "It's gone. It's deleted." Imani released him and stepped back, surveying the scene. 3 of Lincoln High's most notorious bullies lay on the floor, thoroughly defeated. The hallway was packed with students, many of whom had their phones out, recording everything. Principal Davidson was pushing through the crowd, his face a mask of shock and confusion. "Miss Washington," he began, his voice shaky. "What in the world?" "These 3 students attempted to push me down the stairs," Imani said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "When I defended myself, they continued their assault. I used reasonable force to protect myself from further harm. I'm sure the multiple videos being recorded will corroborate my account." She turned to address the gathered students, many of whom were still filming. What you just witnessed is what happens when bullies mistake kindness for weakness. I came to this school to teach, to share my love of literature with young minds. I've endured 3 weeks of harassment, discrimination, and deliberate attempts to drive me away. Today, that ends. Tyler groaned from the floor, trying to sit up. His face was red with embarrassment and rage. You can't do this, he wheezed. My father will sue. You'll be fired. Your father? Imani interrupted. Will be receiving a detailed report of your behavior, including the racist comments you've made in my classroom and your attempted assault this morning. Connor, your mother will be interested to know how the superintendent's son spends his time. And Mason, I'm sure your family's donations to the athletic program won't protect you from assault charges. Principal Davidson finally found his voice. Everyone to class. Now, he looked at the 3 boys on the floor. You 3? My office. Miss Washington. I'll need to speak with you as well. Of course, Imani replied, straightening her blazer. But first, I need to collect my teaching materials from the stairs and prepare for my first period class. Education doesn't stop for bullies. As she gathered her scattered papers, she heard the whispers starting to but for the first time since arriving at Lincoln High, they weren't whispers of derision or discrimination. They were whispers of awe, respect, and a newfound understanding that Miss Imani Washington was far more than she appeared. Sarah Chen approached tentatively, holding a handful of papers she'd collected. Miss Washington? That was incredible. Where did you learn to do that? Imani smiled, the first genuine smile she'd worn at Lincoln High. 15 years of judo training. Sarah, my sensei always said, the best fights are the ones you avoid. But sometimes, she glanced at Tyler being helped to his feet by Connor and Mason, all 3 looking thoroughly deflated. Sometimes you have to stand your ground. Will you teach us? Another student? Marcus Williamson, of the few black students at Lincoln had, approached not just judo, but how to stand up like that? Me too, added Jennifer Park, a quiet sophomore who Imani had noticed being picked on by some of the popular girls. I'm tired of being afraid. Within minutes, a small crowd of students had gathered around her, all expressing similar sentiments. These were the overlooked ones, the different ones, the ones who didn't fit into Lincoln High's narrow definition of acceptable. They saw in Imani not just a teacher who could defend herself, but a symbol of resistance against the bullying culture that had made their lives miserable. First period bell is about to ring, Imani announced, though her heart swelled at their support. But if you're serious about learning self-defense, and more importantly, self-respect, meet me in room 205 after school. We'll discuss starting a club. As the students dispersed, chattering excitedly, Principal Davidson approached. Robert Davidson was a decent man, trapped in a difficult position, trying to maintain order while navigating the political minefield of wealthy parents and school board politics. His gray hair seemed to have acquired a few more silver strands in the last 10 minutes. Miss Washington, he said quietly, while I understand you were defending yourself, this situation is complicated. The Brennan family, the McBrides, the Hughes, they have significant influence. There will be pushback. I'm aware, Imani replied, meeting his gaze steadily. But I have a question for you. Principal Davidson, how long have you known about Tyler and his friends' behavior? How many other students have they tormented while you looked the other way because of their family's influence? Davidson's face flushed. That's not fair. You try to maintain the status quo? Imani interrupted gently but firmly. I understand the pressure you're under. But today, 3 students physically assaulted a teacher. The fact that I was able to defend myself doesn't change that. What message does it send if there are no consequences? The principal sighed heavily. You're right, of course, but you need to be prepared. The Brennans will likely demand your termination. They might even pursue legal action. Let them try, Imani said. I have witnesses, video evidence, and a documented pattern of harassment. Plus, she smiled slightly, I have something they don't expect. I'm not going anywhere. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. News of the incident spread through Lincoln High like wildfire. Videos circulated on social media despite the school's attempts to contain them. Miss Washington Warrior began trending locally. Students who'd never spoken to her before stopped by her classroom to express support. Even some teachers, the ones who'd witnessed Tyler's behavior but felt powerless to stop it quietly, thanked her. During lunch, Imani sat in her empty classroom, finally allowing herself to process what had happened. Her hands shook slightly as she ate her sandwich-delayed adrenaline response. She'd been in hundreds of judo matches. But this was different. This wasn't a controlled environment with rules and referees. This had been real, with real consequences yet to come. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Saw the news. Baby, so proud of you. Your father would be too. Remember what Master Takahashi taught you: victory with honor. Tears pricked Imani's eyes. Her father had passed 5 years ago, but he'd been her biggest supporter in both teaching and martial arts. He'd driven her to every tournament, celebrated every victory, consoled her after every loss. He would have been proud today not of the violence, but of her standing up for herself and others. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Sarah Chen entered, followed by about a dozen students. They filed in quietly, finding seats or standing along the walls. Miss Washington, Sarah begun, we wanted you to know that we've started a petition. We're demanding the school board take action against bullying and protect teachers who stand up to it. We already have over 200 signatures. Marcus Williams added, and my older brother's a lawyer. He says what Tyler did was assault. Clear as day. He's willing to help if you need legal representation. Jennifer Parks spoke up, her voice stronger than Imani had ever heard it. You showed us that we don't have to be victims, that it's okay to fight back. Not with violence necessarily, but by standing up for what's right. Imani looked at these brave young people and felt a surge of emotion. This was why she taught not for the salary or the summers off, but for moments like this, when students found their voices and their courage. Thank you all, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But I need you to understand something. What happened this morning was a last resort. Violence should never be the first answer. What we need to focus on is changing the culture that allows bullies like Tyler to thrive. How do we do that? Asked Jennifer. By standing together, Imani replied. By refusing to be silent when we see injustice. By supporting each other, and yes, by learning to defend ourselves not just physically, but emotionally and socially. Bullies rely on isolation and fear. When we unite, they lose their power. The afternoon brought the expected storm. At 2:30 p.m., Imani was called to Principal Davidson's office. The scene that greeted her was predictable but still intimidating. Tyler Brennan sat with his parent-she's father, Richard, in an expensive suit. His mother, Patricia, dripping with jewelry and indignation. Connor McBride was there with his mother, Superintendent Linda McBride, whose face was a mask of professional neutrality, hiding personal fury. Mason Hughes huddled between his parents, looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. This is outrageous, Richard Brennan was saying as Imani entered. This woman assaulted my son. We demand her immediate termination and criminal charges filed. She attacked 3 students, Patricia Brennan added, her voice shrill. What kind of animal attacks children? Imani took a seat calmly, placing her folder of documentation on the table. Good afternoon, everyone. I assume we're here to discuss the attempted assault on me this morning? Attempted assault? Richard Brennan's face turned purple. You threw my son to the ground. He has bruises. We have medical documentation. And I have video evidence of your son and his friends attempting to push me down a flight of marble stairs. Imani replied evenly, an action that could have resulted in serious injury or death. I defended myself using minimum necessary force. Minimum force? Linda McBride spoke for the first time. You're a black belt in judo. You used martial arts training against untrained teenagers. Untrained teenagers who outweigh me by 50 to 100 pounds each. Imani countered. Who coordinated an attack designed to cause maximum harm? Your son, Superintendent McBride, was an active participant. Is that the kind of behavior you endorse in the district? The superintendent's jaw tightened. Of course not, but surely there were other ways to handle. There were. Imani interrupted. I tried them all. I spoke with Tyler privately. I attempted to engage him academically. I maintained professional composure, despite 3 weeks of escalating harassment. I have documentation of racist comments, deliberate disruption of my classes, and today's physical assault. At what point am I allowed to defend myself? You should have reported it to administration. Patricia Brennan snapped. Imani turned to Principal Davidson. Should I share the 3 incident reports I filed, or discuss the response or lack thereof to my concerns? Davidson shifted uncomfortably. The truth was that he had soft-pedaled her complaints, hoping the situation would resolve itself. Now that negligence was coming back to haunt him, Richard Brennan leaned forward aggressively. Listen here, Miss Washington. I don't care what you think happened. I care about results. And the result I want is you gone from this school today, or I'll make sure you never teach again anywhere in this state. Mr. Brennan, Imani said quietly. Are you threatening me? It's not a threat. It's a promise. He replied. I have connections you can't imagine. One phone call and what? Imani pulled out her phone. Would you like to repeat that threat? I'm recording this conversation. By the way, Minnesota is a one-party consent state for recordings. Everything you've said is admissible. The room went silent. Richard Brennan's face cycled through several shades of red. Additionally, Imani continued. I should mention that the videos of this morning's incident have been shared with my attorney. He's particularly interested in your son's history of harassment and the school's failure to address it. We're prepared to file charges for assault, conspiracy to commit assault, and violation of my civil rights through the creation of a hostile work environment based on race. This is blackmail, Linda McBride exclaimed. No, Imani replied. This is accountability, something your sons have avoided for far too long. However, I'm willing to discuss alternatives to legal action if we can agree on meaningful changes. Principal Davidson seized the opening. What kind of changes? Imani opened her folder, pulling out a typed document. First, mandatory anti-bullying training for all students, with special sessions for those with documented behavioral issues. Second, the establishment of a peer mediation program to address conflicts before they escalate. Third, diverse representation on disciplinary committees to ensure fair treatment for all students. Fourth, a self-defense club that teaches not just physical techniques, but conflict resolution and confidence building. And if we agree to this, Richard Brennan asked through gritted teeth, then I won't pursue criminal charges or a civil lawsuit. Imani said, your son and his friends will serve appropriate school punishment suspension, community service, and mandatory counseling. They'll also write letters of apology to every student they've bullied and, trust me, I have a list. This is extortion. Patricia Brennan hissed. This is justice. Imani corrected. Your son tried to push me down 22 marble steps. In many states, that's attempted murder. I'm offering him a chance to learn and grow, instead of facing criminal prosecution. I'd say that's more than fair. The negotiations continued for another hour. Parents blustered, threatened, and eventually began to accept reality. The videos were damning. Imani's documentation was thorough. Her legal position was strong. More importantly, public opinion had already turned. The number Miss Washington Warrior hashtag had evolved into number Stand with Washington, with students and parents from across the district, sharing their own stories of bullying and administrative indifference. By 4 p.m., an agreement had been reached. Tyler, Connor, and Mason would serve 2-week suspensions, perform 60 hours of community service at a youth center in a predominantly black neighborhood, and attend weekly counseling sessions for the remainder of the school year. The school would implement all of Imani's proposed changes. The families would not pursue any action against her, and she would not file criminal charges. As the families filed out, Richard Brennan stopped at the door. You think you've won? He said quietly. But this isn't over. You're right, Imani replied. It's not over. It's just beginning. Your son has an opportunity to become a better person. Whether he takes it is up to him and you. After they left, Principal Davidson slumped in his chair. That was intense. That was necessary. Imani corrected. How many other students have suffered because we've allowed bullies free rein? How many teachers have left because they couldn't handle the harassment? This stops now. Davidson nodded slowly. You're right. I've been a coward. Prioritizing politics over principles? That changes today. You have my full support for these initiatives. Thank you, Imani said, standing to leave. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a self-defense club meeting to organize. Room 205 was packed, not just with students, but with some parents and even a few teachers. Word had spread throughout the day, and the crowd was far larger than Imani had anticipated. She stood at the front of the room, still in her teaching clothes, but radiating a different energy than her usual classroom demeanor. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Today's incident was unfortunate but perhaps necessary. It exposed issues that have been festering at Lincoln High for too long. But we're not here to dwell on the past. We're here to build a better future." She paused, scanning the eager faces before her. "This club will be about more than just self-defense techniques. Yes, I'll teach you basic judo move show to fall safely, how to escape from grabs, how to use an attacker's force against them, but more importantly, we'll work on confidence, situational awareness, and conflict de-escalation. Will you teach us that throw you did on Tyler?" a voice called out, causing nervous laughter. Imani smiled. "Eventually, but first, you'll learn the most important lesson in martial arts. The best fight is the one you avoid. Physical techniques are a last resort. Real strength comes from knowing who you are, standing up for what's right, and supporting others who need help." She moved to the center of the room, demonstrating a basic stance. Judo means the gentle way. It's about maximum efficiency with minimum effort. It's about using your opponent's strength against them, but it's also about respect, discipline, and personal growth. If you join this club, you commit to using what you learn responsibly. For the next hour, Imani led the group through basic exercises. She taught them how to fall safely, the same technique that had saved her on the stairs. She showed them simple escapes from wrist grabs. More importantly, she talked about awareness, about trusting instincts, about the difference between aggressive and assertive behavior. Sarah Chen, working with Jennifer Park, successfully escaped from a practice hold. Both girls grinned with pride. Marcus Williams helped a younger student with proper stance. Even some of the teachers participated, admitting they'd felt helpless when confronted by aggressive students or parents. As the session wound down, Imani addressed the group one final time. "What happened today was a catalyst, but real change takes time and effort. I need each of you to commit not just to learning these techniques, but to changing the culture of our school. Stand up for each other. Report bullying when you see it. Include those who are excluded. Show kindness to those who are different." "What about Tyler and his friends?" someone asked. "What happens when they come back?" "They'll have a choice," Imani replied. "They can continue their old patterns and face the consequences. Or they can learn and grow. That's up to them. What matters is that we're no longer victims waiting for someone else to save us. We're a community that protects and supports each other." As the crowd dispersed, many stopped to thank her personally. Parents shook her hand, some with tears in their eyes, grateful that someone had finally stood up to the culture of bullying that had made their children's lives miserable. Teachers admitted their own fears and failures, promising to do better. Marcus Williams lingered after most had left. "Miss Washington, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Marcus, how do you do it? Deal with the racism?" "I mean, Tyler said things. I hear things too. How do you stay so calm?" Imani considered her answer carefully. "I won't lie and say it's easy. Those words hurt. The assumptions people make, the barriers they put up, it's exhausting. But I had good teachers. Not just in school, but in life. They taught me that my worth isn't determined by someone else's ignorance. They taught me to channel anger into action, to use negative experiences as fuel for positive change. My mom says I should just ignore it." Marcus said, "Turn the other cheek. Sometimes that's the right response." Imani agreed. "But sometimes turning the other cheek just gets you slapped twice. The key is knowing when to walk away and when to stand your ground. Today, I stood my ground because walking away would have meant abandoning all of you who needed to see that bullies don't always win." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Could you teach me privately? Not just the judo, but the other stuff, the confidence, the way you carry yourself. I want to be like that. I'd be honored." Imani said, "But remember, the goal isn't to be like me. It's to be the best version of yourself." That evening, Imani finally made it home to her small apartment. Her mother was waiting. Having prepared dinner despite her limited mobility, the older woman's eyes shone with pride as Imani recounted the day's events. "Your father would be so proud," her mother said, reaching across the table to squeeze Imani's hand. "Not because you fought, but because you stood up for what's right. That takes real courage." "I was terrified," Imani admitted. "When I felt myself falling, all I could think about was you. Who would take care of you if something happened to me? But then the training kicked in. and suddenly I wasn't falling, I was in control. That's life. Baby, her mother said wisely, we're all falling sometimes. The trick is learning how to land safely and get back up. Later that night, Imani sat on her bed, laptop open, reading the flood of emails that had come in. Some were supportive, others critical. One stood out, a message from Master Takahashi. Now 83 years old and living in California, my dear student, he wrote, I saw the video of your encounter. Your technique was flawless. But more importantly, your restraint was admirable. You used exactly the force necessary. No, Mori, you remembered that judo is not about defeating enemies but about improving oneself and society. I am proud to have been your teacher. Tears flowed freely as Imani read his words. She typed back a response, thanking him for the lessons that had saved her life in more ways than one. The next weeks brought significant changes to Lincoln High. True to the agreement, Tyler, Connor, and Mason served their suspensions. When they returned, they were subdued. Avoiding Imani's classroom and keeping their heads down, the mandatory counseling sessions seemed to be having an effect, particularly on Mason, who eventually approached Imani privately to offer a genuine apology. I never wanted it to go that far, he said, unable to meet her eyes. I wanted to fit in. Tyler and Connor were the cool kids. You know? I thought if I went along with them, I'd be cool too. I'm sorry. Apology accepted, Imani said, but now you need to make amends. Use your influence for good. You have a chance to be a leader in a positive way. The self-defense club grew rapidly, eventually requiring a larger space and additional instructors. Imani brought in colleagues from her old dojo, including female instructors who could serve as role models for the many girls who joined. The club became about more than just physical techniques, became a support network for students who'd felt powerless. Jennifer Park transformed the most dramatically. The quiet girl who'd been bullied for years found her voice and her strength. She became one of the club's most dedicated members, eventually earning her yellow belt and helping to teach newer students. Her confidence in the dojo translated to confidence in life. She ran for student council and won, becoming an advocate for anti-bullying policies. The peer mediation program, initially met with skepticism, proved surprisingly effective. Students trained in conflict resolution helped diffuse dozens of potential confrontations. The diversity committee ensured that disciplinary actions were fair and consistent, regardless of a student's background or family connections. Tyler Brennan struggled the most with the new reality. His second week back, he tested the boundaries, making a snide comment to a freshman in the hallway. Within minutes, 5 members of the self-defense club had surrounded him, not threateningly, but present, watching, making it clear that bullying would no longer be tolerated. This isn't over, he'd muttered, but his words lacked conviction. His power had been broken, his immunity stripped away. Without Connor and Mason backing him up, Connor had transferred to a private school, and Mason had genuinely reformed. Tyler was just another student who had to follow the rules. The transformation of Lincoln High didn't happen overnight, but by the end of the semester, the change was palpable. Incidents of bullying had dropped by 70%. Academic performance improved as students felt safer and more supported. The waiting list for Imani's English classes grew so long that the administration had to add additional sections. One December morning, Imani arrived to find her classroom decorated with paper snowflakes and a banner reading, "Thank you, Miss Washington." Her students had organized a surprise appreciation celebration. As she stood there, surrounded by young people whose lives had been changed by her courage, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. From a scared 13-year-old in Master Takahashi's dojo to a teacher who'd literally been pushed to the edge and fought back, it had all led to this moment. The techniques that had saved her life on those marble stairs had done more than prevent injury. They'd sparked a revolution of empowerment that rippled through an entire community. Sarah Chen, now the editor of the school newspaper, had written an editorial that captured the transformation. Miss Washington didn't just teach us to defend ourselves physically. She taught us to defend our dignity, our values, and each other. She showed us that standing up to bullies isn't about violence, it's about courage, community, and refusing to be silent in the face of injustice. The spring semester brought an unexpected visitor. Master Takahashi, despite his age, had flown in from California to see his former student. Imani had arranged for him to speak to the self-defense club, and the gymnasium was packed with students, parents, and community members who'd heard about the legendary instructor. "Judo saved my life," Master Takahashi began, his voice still strong despite his years. "Not because it taught me to fight, but because it taught me to respect myself and others." Miss Washington embodies the true spirit of judo. She used her strength, not for personal glory, but to protect and inspire others. This is the highest achievement of any martial artist. He presented Imani with a ceremonial belt and embroidered with Japanese characters. "This says gentle strength, fierce compassion." He translated, "It describes you perfectly." After his speech, Master Takahashi observed a club session. He watched as Imani guided her students through techniques, correcting stances, encouraging the frustrated, praising small victories. He saw how the students looked at her with respect, admiration, and genuine affection. "You've built something special here," he told her afterward. "This is what judo is meant to do, create positive change in the world. Your father would be very proud." That evening, there was a community dinner in the school cafeteria. The same space where students had once segregated themselves by social status and race was now filled with a diverse mix of people sharing food and stories. Tyler Brennan was notably absent, but his parents attended, maintaining a careful distance from Imani, but observing the changes in the school culture. Principal Davidson gave a speech acknowledging the transformation. 6 months ago, Lincoln High had a bullying problem we refused to acknowledge. It took courage the kind shown by Miss Washington and our students to force us to confront uncomfortable truths. Today, we're not perfect, but we're better. We're a community that protects all its members, regardless of race, background, or social status. As the school year drew to a close, Imani reflected on the journey during a quiet moment in her empty classroom. The incident on the stairs had been a catalyst, but the real work had happened in the months that followed. Every student who found their voice, every bully who chose a different path, every bystander who became an ally, these were the true victories. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Park. "Got into Northwestern. Essay was about how you changed my life. Thank you for everything." Moments later, another from Marcus Williams. "Mom says yes to the summer intensive judo camp. Can't wait to train more." And surprisingly, one from Mason Hughes. "Starting assistant teaching at the youth center. Want to help kids like you helped me. Thank you for believing people can change." These messages, more than any belt or recognition, validated Imani's approach. She'd taken a moment of crisis and transformed it into an opportunity for growth, not just her own, but for an entire community. On the last day of school, Imani's advanced placement literature class presented her with a gift photo album documenting the year. The first image was a screenshot from that fateful morning, showing her mid-throw as Tyler flew through the air. The caption read, "The moment everything changed." But it was the other photos that brought tears to her eyes. Images of the self-defense club growing from a dozen students to over 100. Pictures of former victims standing tall, of former bullies working in community service, of diverse groups of students studying together. The final photo showed her classroom packed with students, all holding signs that spelled out, "Courage is contagious." "You taught us more than literature," Sarah Chen said, speaking for the class. "You taught us that sometimes the most important stories are the ones we write with our actions." As summer began, Imani received an unexpected call. The National Education Association wanted her to speak at their annual conference about creating inclusive, bully-free school environments. Publishers were interested in her story. Other schools wanted to implement her programs. But Imani's focus remained on Lincoln High and the students who still needed her. She spent the summer expanding the self-defense program, creating a curriculum that other schools could adapt, and working with at-risk youth in the community. Many were kids like she had been targets for bullies, unsure of their own worth, needing someone to show them they were stronger than they knew. One humid July evening, she was training a group of middle schoolers when one of them, a tiny girl named Aisha, asked, "Miss Washington, what if I'm not brave like you?" Imani knelt to Aisha's level. "I wasn't always brave. I was scared a lot. But bravery isn't about not feeling fear, it's about doing what's right, despite the fear. And you know what? You're here. learning to protect yourself and others. That makes you brave already. But what if someone pushes me down the stairs? Aisha persisted. Then you'll know how to fall safely, Imani replied, demonstrating the Ukemi technique, and you'll know how to get back up. But more importantly, you'll know you're not alone. You'll have all of us standing with you. As the new school year approached, Imani prepared for the challenges ahead. Tyler Brennan had transferred to a military academy. Perhaps the structure and discipline would help him find a better path. Connor McBride was at his new private school, hopefully learning that privilege didn't equal permission to harm others. Mason Hughes had become one of the Self-Defense Club's most dedicated members, using his experience to help other former bullies understand the damage they'd caused and how to make amends. The first day of the new school year brought a surprise. As Imani climbed those same marble stairs where everything had changed, she found them lined with students members of the Self-Defense Club forming an honor guard. They applauded as she passed, and she saw in their faces not just respect for her, but confidence in themselves. Her new classroom was in the same location, but everything else had changed. The walls displayed photos from the Self-Defense Club, quotes about courage and compassion, and a banner gifted by Master Takahashi with the Japanese characters for "Fall down 7 times, stand up 8. As her first period students filed, Ina, mix of new faces and returning ones, Imani felt the weight of responsibility and the lightness of purpose. She'd started the previous year as just another teacher trying to make a difference. She'd been tested in ways she never expected, pushed to her limits literally and figuratively, but she'd landed on her feet, just as Master Takahashi had taught her all those years ago, and in doing so, she'd helped others find their footing too. The girl who'd been bullied in middle school had become a woman who stood up to bullies. The student who'd learned to fall safely had become a teacher who caught others before they fell. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority that came from having been tested and not found wanting. "I'm Miss Washington, and this is Advanced Literature. Before we begin, I want you to know something. This is a safe space. In this room, we respect each other's voices, we support each other's growth, and we stand up for what's right. Now, let's open our books and explore some incredible stories together." As her students opened their copies of To Kill a Mockingbird, the same book that had sparked Tyler's racist outburst the previous year, Imani smiled. Literature had always been about more than words on a page. It was about understanding the human experience, about finding courage in unlikely places, about standing up for justice, even when the odds seemed insurmountable. Just like life. Just like that moment on the stairs when she'd refused to fall. Just like every day since, when she'd helped others learn to fly. The videos from that September morning still circulated online, accumulating millions of views. Comments poured in from around the world, teachers who'd faced similar situations, students who'd been bullied, parents desperate for solutions. The footage had become more than just a viral moment. It had become a symbol of resistance against bullying and discrimination. As she began the day's lesson, Imani Washington knew that she stood on solid ground she'd claimed not through aggression, but through the perfect balance of gentle strength and fierce compassion. The same balance that had saved her on those marble stairs, the same balance she now taught to others. One student, one day, one moment of courage at a time. The girl who'd learned to fall had taught an entire school how to rise, and they were all still rising.